Okay, what's going on, YouTube? Last Good Man in Jersey. Some of you have seen this before. I am redoing it. I went back, listened to the audio, and I didn't have my microphone when I did this the first time, so the audio was pretty poor. We're going to fix that. We're going to take a really quick look at an assessment that was done. You've got the source listed here on the bottom. I'm also going to link it in the description. There's a study that was done called The Real Lives of Women Who Never Have Children, and it's really interesting. Part of what you'll find is I spend a lot of time saying, guys, let's learn from feminism and not make the same mistakes that they did. And we're going to talk about a very interesting find on women who never had kids and kind of how they ended up where they are. To jump into this, uh, first thing we're going to do is kind of hear. By their mid 40s, about 1 in 7 women have never had kids. And in this study, we're looking very specifically at women who don't have fertility issues, so they can have kids, they just never get around to it. And we're going to be focusing on that seventh woman, that 1 in 7, who never seem to have kids. And we're going to try to understand why it is that they ended up where they did, aging out of fertility with no children. Okay. Let me give you a couple of quick bullet points on the study. It's always important to understand study design and make sure it makes sense. This was a 33-year study. For the sake of argument, let's say it started roughly around 1960. There's a little bit of an error range around that, but basically 1960 carried out to almost 2000. 4,500 women were interviewed, and each of these women was interviewed at 19 different points over these 33 years, ranging from like their early 20s to their mid to late 40s. The basic idea was, let's take women who we're going to start talking to right at about the time that they would start having children, and let's follow through with them through their life. Let's just follow through their life to see how many of them do have kids, how many of them don't, and why. And the why is the most important part. So we're going to be getting to that. Now, here's what a study found. One of the points. When you talk to women about their expectations for having kids of their own, what you'll find is, as they get older, they realize that the likelihood that they're going to have kids of their own declines. So when these women were interviewed and they were around 24, only about 10% of these women said they don't expect to have any biological kids. Those numbers start to increase. You notice that, by age 40, almost 80% are saying they don't expect to have kids of their own. 92% are saying they don't expect to have kids of their own. So there's some pretty big jumps from 24 to almost double that, 46, in their expectations. Now, with that being kind of the expectation, let's talk about how they ended up where they are. There were a couple of different buckets, and just take a guess for a second. If you look at women who never wanted kids versus women who expected to have them, just never did, versus women who weren't always serious about it. Sometimes they were in a good situation, sometimes they weren't, kind of flip-flopping at different points in their life. And then lastly, women who just waited too long. They focused on their career, they prioritized other things. One day they woke up and they were no longer fertile. What do you think the numbers are going to look like for this? I'm going to show you in just a second, but just take a moment to guess. Where do you think the majority of women are going to fall? Okay. You probably didn't expect the numbers to look like this. I know I didn't. The percent of women who can have kids and don't because they never wanted them is only 2%. 98% of the women who end up aging out of fertility childlessly wanted kids at some point in their life. Wasn't necessarily the priority. Now, if we play this out, about 1% say they expected to have kids, they just never did. There could be a lot of things going on with that medically, but they were trying and there were complications. Okay. 2% didn't want them, 1% wanted them, and there were issues. The other 97% of women either weren't serious about it, or they waited too long. 51% that weren't serious, 46% waited too long to have kids. Now, let's think about that for a second, because what I want to do is make sure that we don't end up falling into that same trap. First thing you got to do is really make sure you understand whether you're a person who wants kids or not. Some people don't want kids, some people do. What's important here is to understand that if you do, you don't want to take it for granted, because you don't necessarily know what's waiting for you around the corner. Life happens. Illnesses can lead to your fertility, spousal infertility. You meet someone who's the love of your life, but they're infertile. There are all sorts of things that can happen that can impact your ability to have kids, even though we don't have the same biological clock that women do. So it's important to think about that and to plan ahead, because what we're seeing is that a lot of women who never have kids did want them. 97% of these women did want them. They just kept delaying things until one day they couldn't have them and the decision was taken away from them. If you want kids and you don't have a plan, well, I would challenge you to really think about how likely it is that you could end up in a similar situation as the 97% of women that were found in this study to not have kids at to age out of fertility. Let's not let that happen to us. If you can't find a great woman in the West, travel to Southeast Asia. I'm going to be in Cebu in 2 weeks, not specifically going there to find, a mother for my next kids. I want to go and I want to see Cebu. I want to see if the culture is as amazing and different from here as they say. But that's my plan. And I'm strongly encouraging other guys to take a look at other locations. We always hear go where you're celebrated, not where you're tolerated. Let's not make that just an empty talking point. Let's actually step up and do it. Last Good Man in Jersey signing out. Have your kids while you can.